Understand that to listen to this podcast is not to cross the line and find yourself in an enemy land. No, to continue on is to be made aware that you have lived your entire life in an enemy land. An unseen war rages all about you, and it is my task to open your eyes to it. To see this war is to join it. Everyone can fight, but not everyone will. Surrender is an option, and one taken by many. But maybe you are better than that. Stronger. Braver. So I have to ask, will you fight? This is the Endless Elsewhere podcast. With a quote from an old book. That's how we opened last season. That's how we've opened every season since the start. You know that, listener. You already know everything that I'm about to discuss. But in case you've gotten hazy on the details, and no one would fault you for that with this show, or if you're a newcomer who somehow stumbled upon this recording, well, the excerpt you just heard comes from the final installment of a trilogy, 3 of 3 in a set of historical memoirs that collectively tell an unbelievable and impossible story. It's a tale that not only rewrites our past, but our future as well. These books speak of monsters, magic, and miracles. More specifically, they chronicle the life of a genius inventor, scientist, and adventurer, of his nemesis, a time-traveling ghost, and of their epic fight over an ancient relic, a key that unlocks a door to another world. It's bananas, I know. The books also speak of a seemingly all-powerful, all-evil organization that quietly rules the Earth. They too were after this key. They are still after this key, as they wish to hold sovereignty over both worlds. You know how tyrants are. The manuscripts were discovered and published in Circle City years ago by an independent archivist, a mysterious man by the name of J.P. Leck, Joseph to me. He and I partnered for this podcast to investigate these books, and along the way, we sorta fell desperately in love. So amid all of the paranormal hoopla that pervades our show, there's a splash of romance as well, if you're into that kind of thing. Now, the evil organization I mentioned, the Illuminati types that we refer to as the Cabal, they didn't like that Joseph had published the manuscripts, as it exposed their nefarious plans. But when he and I then started this podcast, well, they weren't too happy about that either. At first, the Cabal was content to let the pair of us be, assuming the public at large would think our podcast fiction, just as they had the books. However, the popularity of our project has only grown. We reached more and more people, and we actually started to convince some of them that all of this was true. For that reason, and others we'll get into, the Cabal then decided to shut us down. They started with buying out the radio station where I worked. You see, I used to host Circle City Supernatural, a late-night paranormal call-in show. It was actually through my show that I first learned of the books, of Joseph, and of all this madness.
It was different when your voice was just reaching a handful of people, Lindsay. But now, it's all over the world, and that's a problem for them. They know we use the station for the podcast, so they're taking it away.
Then they're as wrong as we were about us needing this place. We can set up somewhere else. We can keep at least the podcast going. They have to know that.
I'm sure they do. Maybe this is a warning. A final warning to walk away?
It was a warning we were to ignore, obviously. Oh, that was Sylvia, by the way, my producer and friend, who broke the news to me about the buyout. And it wasn't the last of the bad news we were to get that night. Remember the time-traveling ghost I mentioned? His name is Clarence Grindle, and he'd made a home of Circle City some time ago, as had all of his pets. That is, a legion of unearthly creatures, those monsters spoken of in the books. According to the story, in a long ago time, in a long ago place, Grindle held sway over these things, imprinting on them as it was described to me. So when Grindle manifested in the modern era, in Circle City, they sensed his presence from across the globe and migrated to him. Back in Season 1, Joseph and I, along with a local detective agency called the Enclosing Eye, had gone to war with Grindle and won, trapping his spirit in a containment vessel we called the Gin Jar. Upon his defeat and imprisonment, the creatures could no longer sense his presence here and departed. And now for the rest of the bad news I mentioned a moment ago. Our show was ending, but we weren't off the air yet, and I still had a job to do. I got a call from a storm chaser named Fran. She and her team were out on the road where they'd witnessed a gargantuan serpent coiling among the clouds. And below this, on the ground, all moving together, migrating, were other things that she could only describe as, well, monstrous.
Whatever these things are, they are all heading into Circle City as we speak. I felt like I should warn someone about this. Sorry I couldn't do more. Good luck, Circle City.
So it seemed that at least some of Grindle's pets were making a return, and there was only one possible explanation. It was Joseph who said it.
He's out. Grindle is free of the gin jar.
We can't know that. Even if that was true, how?
I don't know.
The Unclosing Eye said their plan was to put the gin jar into the repository. Do you think they actually did? The Unclosing Eye Detective Agency was to have placed the gin jar, along with the spirit of Clarence Grindle, into what they called the repository, a sort of cabinet of curiosities for supernatural artifacts. This they kept secret in the basement of an old church out on the edge of town. We went there to see for ourselves. With horror did Joseph and I find the church, the repository, and the gin jar itself all broken into. This was the work of Leonard Dyer, another old enemy of ours from Season 1. Yeah, we tend to collect enemies. It was best put this way.
You know how some people make friends everywhere they go? You two? You're the opposite.
That was the voice of Keith Sorrels, the founder of the detective agency. He too had returned to the church after learning of Grindle's escape. Sorrels had figured out that Leonard Dyer, a man whom we'd exposed as a fraud in our first Halloween special, had come here seeking revenge on Joseph and I. He did so by freeing Grindle and offering himself as a new host to the time traveler. But once again, that was not where the bad news ended. Fredrick Hardesty, another member of the Unclosing Eye, had come with Keith to the church that day. As a reminder, Hardesty is a German scientist who once worked for the Cabal, but had turned on them. Oh, and back in the day, he also had his brain transplanted to a little device in order to cheat death. He had since upgraded to a full robotic body, but to keep a low profile, this mech had been parked at the agency's office. So he was, at the moment, back in his original vessel, a small mobile unit that had to be lugged around. As harmless as he now seemed, Hardesty still frightened us as he came bearing rather grave tidings.
No, Hardesty, don't tell me.
Grindle's escape compounds an already dire situation, Herr Leck. The Cabal have initiated the next phase of their plan.
They've disguised the project as a restoration thing, when in actuality they're...
Oh, I'm very aware of what they're doing with the water tower, Sorrels.
Apologies, Herr Leck, but when we last spoke, I failed to convince you that certain events must come to pass as predicted by the Dreamcatcher. Each of these events are a pillar in the Temple of Reality. We cannot afford to lose even one.
You know that I understand what you're trying to do, Hardesty, but you also know that I'm going to keep looking for another way.
There is no recourse.
The water tower, the Dreamcatcher, and the Cabal's plan for Circle City, that's all stuff we'll swing back to here in a bit. What's important now is that Hardesty was convinced that none of the terrible things on the horizon could be stopped. Joseph refused to believe that. They disagreed. They argued. Then it got personal.
I can see that you've convinced Sorrels and the others, but a person would not have come to that conclusion on their own.
A person? Am I not a person, Herr Leck? Do I not have a soul? It was you who made me think it's still possible.
And now I'm starting to wonder.
Before this story is over, Herr Leck, we both will know.
After this unpleasant exchange, we parted ways, Joseph and I returning to his home, where we were awaited by none other than Clarence Grindle. The enemy we'd gone searching for had found us. There he sat in the body of Leonard Dyer. As I said, Dyer had freed Grindle so that both might take their revenge upon us, but the time traveler alone had control of the body now, and he had other plans.
Clearly I'm not here to fight.
Yeah, we'll keep our guard up, thanks.
I'm not here for violence, Mr. Leck. Things have changed, haven't they?
The Cabal. You know their plans for this city.
Indeed, young lady. So it seems we have a common foe, do we not? I have not come here for war, but to make peace. A truce. No, more than that. I'm proposing an alliance.
Sure.
I'm as much their enemy now as the pair of you. I am neither in their service nor in their control. They will not abide that.
You created the Cabal, Grindle.
Accidentally.
So get this. Grindle actually created the Cabal by going back in time and establishing a secret society that continued on into the modern era, becoming a global oligarchy. Yeah, the butterfly effect can be a real beast sometimes. Grindle had created the Cabal, but by mistake.
A mistake that I must correct.
They're not your only mistake, Grindle.
You speak of my creation of this anomalous timeline, and of Hardesti's theory that I have damaged the very structure of reality with my time traveling. Like I said, I caught up on the podcast. And now, to further complicate the situation, my would-be replacement, my mechanized counterpart, the Dreamcatcher, is threatening to destabilize both timelines if certain events don't blah blah blah.
You don't believe Hardesty?
I believe that he believes. When you spoke to him last season, he said a certain catastrophe must come to pass here in Circle City in order to keep the continuities intact.
Is he wrong?
While Hardesty is a genius, he's not been where I have been, and not seen what I have seen. The inner workings of reality are so much more fluid than he realizes.
So there is another way to keep all this from happening.
There's always another way. We can stop the Cabal, Mr. Leck. Together. I've given you much to consider. When you're ready to speak again, you can find me where you did last time. I'll show myself out.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend, or so they say. I rejected Grindle's offer outright, but Joseph thought we should at least entertain the idea, and it became a spot of contention between us. It hung over my partner and I like a dark cloud, so to speak. From here, we delved into the third and final manuscript, the one we quoted at the beginning. From this text, we learned more about the ancient relic and the passageway it creates between our world and the other. To be clear, the relic is a small spherical device, an orb, and the opening it creates is a portal, or a wormhole. But it's not just this cosmic doorway that connects Earth with her sister planet. They are also united by a common history. Let's begin with a race of beings known to antiquity as the Nephilim. They were humanoid giants of contested origin. You can subscribe to one of two schools of thought. These creatures are either extraterrestrials, as the Cabal believes, or they are, as Joseph believes, abominations, an unholy hybrid species born of forbidden breeding between humans and angels. As for me, I don't really care what they are or where they come from, so long as I never have to meet one. Anyway, the Nephilim once possessed the orb and used it to invade the other world in ancient times, going to war with its native inhabitants. The Nephilim failed, however, and the orb was lost to the invaders, marooning them on this distant planet. In the ages that followed, the giants constructed spacecraft with which to make a more practical return to their homeworld, to Earth. The third book reports that one of their vessels made a successful launch. You got all that? It's a lot, I know, but a lot is how we operate around here. We move fast, so try to keep up. Now, as you've heard, each season we focused on a different book, and bewilderingly, each season that book seemed to focus right back on us. I'll let Joseph explain what I mean.
The events of our podcast have directly and indirectly reflected the events of whichever book we focused on each season. And it is crazy, absolutely, but it doesn't really surprise me. You and I have described it as being pulled into the story, but really it's more like we've become the continuation of that story.
Like having the baton passed to you?
Exactly, yes. That's in part how I learned that there will never be an end to this story. This trilogy, it had a conclusion, certainly, but while it was tying off one storyline, it was threading countless others.
And so, unlike the previous books we'd researched, Joseph and I ventured beyond this third and final one, following those threads he mentioned as they extended from the past into the present and beyond. Joseph then outlined this chain of events for me, but of those many links, I will speak only of the most important. The first is an early creation of Fredrick Hardesty's. This was back when he was still part of the Cabal, and, well, in his own body. He called his machine the Music Box. The device emitted a particle field that was to stimulate brain cells and provoke an artificial acceleration of the intellect. Yeah, it was supposed to make you smarter. However, this device did not work as intended, and the only brain cells it stimulated were inactive ones. Any deceased creature who, for lack of a better description, heard the song of the music box was given a new monstrous life in which they had only one thought or desire: to destroy what they no longer were, the living. In short, Hardesty's machine reanimated the dead. It made zombies. Now for the next important link in the chain. Joseph wanted to play a call for me from my radio show, but from before my time. The previous host of Circle City Supernatural, Ray Kadera, once had a call to the show that shed some light on the things we were discussing. So while the station was still ours, we went to listen to it. Sylvia was there and helped us dig up the old call. It concerned a local shopkeeper named Bailey, who'd recovered the suitcase of a long-vanished man named Frank Dashler. The suitcase contained a hidden compartment. Inside this were blueprints of a secret listening station, one disguised as a water tower built in the center of Circle City back in the 1980s. The listening station, this covert spy apparatus, was abandoned before it could even be used, however. As soon as it went live, the water tower was immediately and completely overcome with interference from an unknown source. Fascinated by all of this, Bailey actually broke into the water tower and made a startling find: the skeleton of Frank Dashler, the missing architect from the listening station. Turns out, he'd designed his own tomb. He'd not been killed by the Cabal for his failure, but for his discovery. That discovery? The listening station had picked up a signal coming from deep space, coming from a spacecraft later codenamed the Argosy. My predecessor questioned Bailey.
And what you're telling us all is that something is on its way here.
Something has been on its way here for a very long time, and our little speck on the map is its fated point of arrival. This place, Ray, being the long-intended landing area for something unimaginable, is ground zero for the supernatural because it's cursed. And there's one last thing I haven't told you about yet. When he discovered that the signal had gotten stronger and realized that it was because the source was getting closer, he worked out how to measure the distance between us and the thing coming our way. Dashler was able to approximate its arrival. Ready for this? 2060. Did you hear that, Circle City? You have a little more than 40 years before your entire world changes forever.
What is coming? Please tell us what.
That, I'm afraid, Frank had no answer for. We'll just have to wait and see.
It should be said that Bailey was later murdered, and for the same reason Dashler was, for pursuing this mystery, for not walking away. The Cabal had warned her, but she kept going. Sound familiar? Okay, now we can start connecting these links. I'll let Joseph lay it out for you as he did for me. It's important to know for the clip you're about to hear that we'd stopped in at Joe's Diner, our favorite little eatery. We liked the atmosphere and the coffee. Besides, Piper, the waitress, was our friend. While in our favorite corner booth, Joseph explained the doom that was on its way to Circle City.
Okay, here it is. The Cabal believes that in ancient times, gigantic extraterrestrials came to Earth and befriended mankind, fostering the first great civilization. These aliens then departed with the promise to return, but the civilization they helped create fell into ruin and all knowledge of them was lost. So, when a secret listening station inadvertently uncovered a spacecraft en route to our planet, the Cabal interpreted this as the return of a superior race of beings. As the creatures aboard are in stasis, there is no way to communicate with them, and since the vessel is fully automated, there is no way to divert where it will set down. So the Cabal was confronted with two unchangeable facts: the when and the where of the spacecraft's arrival.
Circle City, in 2060.
Right. And around these two unchangeable facts, they devised a plan. They have determined to clear the way for the return of their overlords, to prepare a place for the Nephilim to not only land, but to live. Now the question was, how do you empty an entire city, displacing millions of people? Thus was born the greatest conspiracy in the history of our species. Hardesty's old device, the music box. It revivifies dead brain cells, giving a monstrous life to corpses, what will be called revenants, or goners. Hardesty's technology will be applied to the listening station. The water tower was designed as a receiver, but will be reworked as a transmitter. The particle field will be so much stronger than before, strong enough to cover an entire city.
What you're describing is...
a false plague, yes. It will be treated as viral, and that's very much the point. They will enact a forcible evacuation, then a semi-permanent quarantine of the city. This is all laid out in that story from the Dreamcatcher.
But the living dead? Really? People are gonna buy that as reality?
Through cultural conditioning, we've all been primed to not only accept something like this, but to expect it. So much so that when it finally happens, the masses will swallow it as truth.
What happens after they clear the city?
The Dreamcatcher goes on to speak of the Cabal erecting a perimeter around the city that will eventually be turned into a massive wall, a rampart. Decades from now, the Cabal will announce that the last of the virus has died out and will begin a restoration of the region. They'll start by tearing down the ruins of the old city with the promise to rebuild, but really they'll just be making a place for the Argosy to land.
In summation, listener, the powers that be are going to fake a zombie apocalypse to make way for an alien invasion. And it's happening right now. Do you see this?
Geez, slow down, fellas.
Joseph, they have guns. They have...
Lindsay, go. Ouch. Whoa, guys. Hey, you can have our money. There's probably some in the register too. Just take it easy.
It's cool. We're not dead. The gunmen were themselves gunned down by the waitress, our friend Piper, who'd been in the kitchen until now. She'd drawn a pistol from under the counter and, well, come to our rescue. As you can imagine, we were rather astonished by this, but not as astonished as when she then showed us a secret observation booth hidden behind a panel in the wall. Piper explained that she was a member of the Cabal, a deep cover operative who'd been embedded in Circle City for years, gathering intelligence. Because of our refusal to walk away from the story, the Cabal had sent mercenaries to kill Joseph and I, but Piper had turned on her masters to save us. It would not take the Cabal long to learn of her betrayal, so she needed to disappear to get off the grid. For this, we turned to the Unclosing Eye Detective Agency, who'd done a similar thing after the events of Season 1. We arranged a meeting. They all knew Piper as well as, if not better than, Joseph and I, and were thunderstruck by the revelation that she had been an operative, one of our enemies. On behalf of everyone, I asked Piper why she'd had a change of heart.
I've watched you all since the beginning, and you have every right to hate me for it. But let me tell you what I have seen in this time. I've seen villains become heroes, and enemies become allies. Against every possible odd, have all of you come together, united by your choice to do the right thing. Look how far all of you have come, and now realize that I've come with you. I've quietly been a part of your journey since the start. Your story is now mine as well. Why the change of heart, you ask? It's because of everyone here. Because of a bunch of random people who just kept coming into a little diner. I'm different now because of you, my regulars.
Great speech. Very emotionally manipulative.
The private detective wasn't buying it, but we convinced him to help us anyway. Sorrels explained that when he, Hardesty, and the rest of his agency had gone underground, they had done so with help. There was a woman in town named Calista. She was what you'd call a fixer. She could help Piper vanish. Hardesty tagged along with Joseph and I when we took Piper to Calista. It turned out that my partner actually knew this woman. He'd once asked for her help as well. Not to disappear a person, but a thing. More on that in a minute.
Mr. Leck, it's been a minute.
Calista, I was hoping you could help my friend here, for old time's sake.
For free? We don't go back as far as you think we do, Mr. Leck.
I can pay you $10,000 in cash. Right now.
The girl comes prepared. Respect. Well, Mr. Leck, you've brought me a profitable client tonight. Now I have something for you. Call it a finder's fee.
It's here? Calista, you were supposed to hide it.
It is hidden.
You haven't used it, right?
Of course not. I don't even know how it works.
Okay, good.
Are you guys talking about the
dream catcher device?
Calista brought the thing out for us to see. It was a small, unassuming gadget, but apparently it had the power to destroy universes. As you've learned, listener, the Cabal once had their own time traveler, Grindle. But since he was no longer a part of them, they had tried to recreate his powers artificially. Hence the Dreamcatcher. To understand this device, you have to think of it as two devices, its present and future self, or selves. It records information in the future, and through tachyon particles and quantum mechanical entanglement and whatever else science, it makes that information available to its present self. The problem, according to Hardesty, is that learning of future events is to solidify them on the timeline, meaning those events must then come to pass, no matter how awful they may be. Apparently, the structure of reality cannot tolerate aberrations. However all this works, I've never understood it. Calista didn't either.
What are you guys talking about?
You're not a listener of our podcast, huh?
I'm more of a true crime girl myself.
An alert came to Callista's phone. There'd been a security breach. Someone had followed us here, someone we recognized. We only knew him as Fivecoat. This man was an operative of Heartland Security, a government entity through which the Cabal would work with impunity. Heartland Security had appeared in Circle City last season. They detected a wormhole as well as the presence of winged, angel-like strangers. Strangels, they were nicknamed. The natives had come to help us, to warn us of the coming doom that had taken flight from their world and was now on its way to ours. But for their trouble, the Strangels were hunted. Fivecoat and the rest of Heartland Security had sought to capture them. Really, it was the orb, that key between the worlds, that the Cabal wanted. However, Joseph and I had aided our new friends' escape back through the portal to their home planet, putting them and the orb beyond the Cabal's reach. Fivecoat, who was in charge of that operation, took the blame. He'd been demoted and reassigned by his agency, but the man had returned to Circle City on his own. He was on a personal vendetta, out for blood. Our blood. Sorrels was proven right yet again. Joseph and I make enemies more or less constantly. Fivecoat had been shadowing us for a while, but was only now making his move. Calista promised to get both Piper and the Dreamcatcher into hiding. We couldn't let either fall into enemy hands. So as they went one direction, Joseph, Hardesty, and I went another, leading Fivecoat away. There ensued a reckless car chase. This ended, as most do, in a crash. We fled on foot back to the detective agency's office where Hardesty's robotic body had been stashed. Fivecoat was relentless and pursued us here. However, by the time he burst in, gun blazing, Hardesty was ready for him. Having been restored to his full-bodied vessel, he clamped a metal hand around the throat of our enemy and, well... Leaving the corpse where it was, we called Sorrels, and the detective agency came to pick us up in their old van. It was cramped quarters as the repository, that old cabinet, had been wedged into the vehicle. Sorrels had determined to move the cabinet for safekeeping. Joseph and I knew of a good, out-of-the-way place, and so, after hiding it there, the lot of us headed back to the church, the ongoing use of which was permitted by Reverend Aiden Wright, who was an ally of the agency's. We met him when he came by the next morning. Their friend had shown up. Then mine did. Sylvia met us there with a backpack full of recording gear. Why did you bring me all this?
I got it from the station.
I didn't know they had all this.
They don't. Not anymore. I stole it. They kicked us out today. We're now officially on our own.
Oh. Cut off from the radio station now, we set up a temporary recording booth in the church basement. We worked on the podcast, not knowing how much time we had left, but resolute to get the truth out no matter what our fate. Determined as we were, though, eventually Sylvia and I took a break. I needed some fresh air and to stretch my legs. That's what I said anyway. Really, I needed to find my place at Joseph's side. That's where I always felt safest, happiest. It's where I always wanted to be, and it's where he wanted me to stay. Forever. Joseph suddenly lowered to one knee and took a ring from his pocket.
Joseph, I don't think we can...
If our part in this story is truly coming to a close, I'd rather meet that end as your husband.
But we can't. I mean, how could we?
We have a church, a reverend, plenty of witnesses. I mean, your closest friend and maid of honor is also here. If those aren't enough signs, then...
Yes.
Yes, what?
I will marry you, Joseph. Today. Now. I don't know how much time I have left, but I want to spend it as your wife.
Right then and there were the pair of us joined in holy matrimony. The honeymoon would have to wait, however, as the Cabal was closing in on us. Their failed attempt to kill us at the diner had been discovered by now. Fivecoat's replacement, a woman named Troxell, had been given a contingent of Heartland Security operatives and charged with our elimination. With extreme prejudice, no doubt. They had a convoy of vehicles and a helicopter, both heavily armed and armored. Fortunately, before this death squad caught up to us, our little group had moved on from the church. As before, splitting up would make all of us harder targets to hit, so Sylvia and Reverend Wright went one way, while the detective agency, Joseph and I, went another. We had nowhere else to flee, so, against my better judgment, we headed for Shady Hollow, an isolated nature preserve where we had done battle with Grindle in Season 1. It's also where he told us to meet him if we wished to unite. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, I guess. Only a few of Grindle's pets were with him, skulking about the woodland that surrounded the now ruinous mansion where he once lived. There was one creature in particular that scared me more than the others. The first of those returning monsters seen by the storm chaser Fran and her team, the Sky Serpent. This thing was as colossal as it was impossible. Somehow it lived, flew, and hid among the darkened clouds, traveling with them. With that same storm that entered Circle City days ago, and which now settled over Shady Hollow, had the Sky Serpent come. Needless to say, we didn't remain outside long. Upon our arrival, we were quick to enter what remained of the mansion. We found Grindle practicing a new trick. He'd mastered how to untether himself from his host so that he may jump from one body to the next with a speed he'd not been capable of before. He was more dangerous now than ever. Fortunately, he was on our side. Troxell and the Death Squad arrived not long after we did. As the convoy made its way through the nature preserve, Grindle directed those creatures of his that were lurking in the woodland to fall upon our enemies, to ambush them.
Grindle?
Oh. My pets took their toll on our foes, but gave their lives in the process and can no longer help us.
How much of Heartland did they get?
Not nearly enough, I'm afraid.
Well, they're going to come at us even harder now. Everybody get ready for...
Down!
The helicopter went ahead of the convoy and fired a missile upon the agency's van, destroying the vehicle and with it, any chance we may have had to escape. Grindle had one pet remaining, the Sky Serpent. He sent it after the gunship.
It's the snake. It's attacking the helicopter.
Who's firing?
It's the helicopter. It's shooting into the storm.
Joseph, the rain. The rain is turning red.
It's bleeding. They're killing it.
It's raining blood. Raining blood, everybody. That's a thing that's totally happening right now.
It's got a piece of them. They're going down.
The Sky Serpent, in its dying act, brought down the helicopter, which veered off to crash into the woods. But then the rest of Heartland's ground forces came for us, surrounding the house. It was our last stand. Hardesty, the mad scientist, had made up some fancy ray guns for our defense. And so, we had ourselves a gunfight.
Heartland is moving in.
Do they think we're dead?
They're about to find out otherwise.
All right, let's melt some faces, people.
The battery cells of our little blasters were soon depleted, and there remained still plenty of our enemies to contend with. Like everything else we'd thrown at them, it just wasn't enough. Troxell, who'd been in the helicopter but survived the crash, then stumbled from the woods a bloody, smoldering mess. Now she was mad. The woman called to us.
Hey, you hear me in there?
Is that?
Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, I'm still alive. You think I got to where I am by not surviving helicopter crashes, you
We're not surrendering.
I'm not asking you to, Cupcake. I just wanted you to know that I was still here, and that a moment from now, you won't be.
Joseph, do you hear that?
Hear it. I can feel it. It's almost like
You're out of tricks. You've played all your cards. You don't have a friend left in this world.
I've mentioned a doorway between worlds quite a bit during this recap. Well, that's what swung open just then. The formation of the portal is a violent event, a maelstrom of wind and light. It's honestly terrifying to behold, but through it came the most glorious of sights, our friends, the Strangels. Just as it was with their first visit to Earth, they had come to help. The Strangels engaged the enemy, but still, Heartland security would not be defeated. Then Grindle acted. His spirit was loosed from his host and he entered the battlefield. He possessed one operative after another, turning them on each other, using them to kill one another or themselves until all but their leader lay dead in the mud. Then he returned to the body of Leonard Dyer.
That worked better than expected.
Grindle?
Yes, I'm back now.
You just
Saved your lives?
committed mass murder.
Regardless, you're welcome.
You killed everyone.
All but one. Your fairy friends have captured Troxell. She's alive, as you wished, Hardesty. I do hope this plan of yours pays off. Oh, who am I kidding? Of course it will. You know what you're doing, Hardesty.
Yeah, I do.
What did you just...
Hardesty shot him with a dart. It contained a toxic cocktail of his own mixing. It more or less thrust Leonard Dyer's body into a vegetative state. Grindle, unable to access his host's mental functions from within, became trapped in the body. Hardesty lifted the inert mass from the floor, and we followed him outside to meet with Troxell, who'd been caught by the Strangels. Our winged friends brought her forward to parley.
My bosses will be here in force any time now. You might as well off me before they get here. I won't make much of a hostage. My employers are well past negotiating with you.
We're not gonna kill you.
Seriously, you might as well. I was in charge of all of this, and, well, it didn't go as planned, did it? So, I'm out, either way.
And if I was to offer you an alternative, when the Cabal arrives, you do not have to be found empty-handed.
Yeah, so I'm listening.
Hardesty had done what the Cabal never could. He'd captured Clarence Grindle, and just when his powers had evolved exponentially. Troxell had watched her unstoppable death squad be eradicated with so much ease by the time traveler, so she knew Hardesty was offering her something profound.
Well, that's not a bad chip to bargain with, Hardesty, but it's not nearly enough for you guys to walk out of here.
Indeed. I am not only offering you Grindle, but myself. More than just myself, my services. You are attempting to extract my technology from the music box and graft it to the water tower facility, but you have so far been unable, yeah?
That might be true.
I will go with you to the water tower. I will complete the work as only I can. I will ensure that your plans for Circle City come to pass.
I knew I was right about you, Hardesty. This whole time you were trying to be something you're not. Pathetic. So, if I agree to this, I have to let your friends here be on their merry way. Is that the deal?
Yeah.
Turns out Hardesty had a soul after all. He was giving Grindle to the Cabal, but he was also sacrificing himself, and all to save his friends. Even still, that wasn't enough for our enemies.
Your detective agency can go, but not the podcasters. I need them off the board. You understand what I'm saying? My employers want them gone. As good as dead.
9. I am giving you everything. This bargain extends to them as well.
It's okay, Hardesty. Troxell, we agreed to your terms.
Yes, we do.
The Strangels moved back into the portal. Joseph and I followed them to the edge of that blazing doorway between worlds, and there paused, turning to each other.
Are we really doing this? Giving up everything? Our whole lives? The life we just started making together? We're going to leave our world for another?
I can't imagine a better honeymoon.
I just didn't think it would end like this.
End? No, my dear. This is not the end. Our story is that of the tremendously endless. For us, my love, this is only the beginning. The perfect beginning.
He kissed me, took my hand, then together we stepped into another world with a backpack full of recording gear. Believe it or not, listener, I'm recording this on an alien planet. I hope to get it back to Earth soon. Oh, but I have so much more than this recap ready for Sylvia. If you're hearing this, that means a whole lot of audio reached her, and that she's releasing it for everyone to hear. Buckle up, my friends. If you thought our adventures on Earth were spectacular, you ain't heard nothing yet. My husband was right. This is only the beginning. Do good. Fight evil. Repeat.